Good evening, everyone. The government has recently issued the draft Indian Telecom Bill 2022. Amongst various amendments and changes, the bill seeks to combine the three acts that govern the telecom sector now. The bill proposes broadening the definition of telecom services with the inclusion of OTT communication services. Let's get a very detailed view of this bill from our esteemed speaker. Our speaker for the day is retired Wing Commander K Prakaash, who is currently Legal and Regulatory Affairs Director Telco at Zoom. A multifaceted lawyer, his experience in legal domain includes arbitration, banking, commercial and engineering contracts, cyber law, intellectual property litigation, labor laws, procurement, privacy, telecom laws, compliance, and software licensing. He commenced his career with a short stint in Central Bank of India and then moved to the Indian Air Force, where he spent the first 7 years as an air traffic and radar controller. Thereafter, he served in the Judge Advocate Department for another 16 years before taking voluntary retirement in 2009 to join the corporate world. While in the Indian Air Force, he conducted more than 100 court martials, handled more than 3,500 litigations, and was the first IAF officer to undergo the prestigious Judge Advocate course with the US Air Force in Montgomery, USA. His stint in the corporate world includes legal departments of IBS Software Services and Cisco. In Cisco, along with being a senior corporate counsel, he was also resident director of Cisco Commercial India Private Limited. In early 2022, he joined Zoom Video Communications. He holds a post-graduation in law and various other professional certifications in law and technology. Very happy to have you, sir. Over to you.
Sorry, I think I was not, am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you are.
Sorry. So thanks, Manju, for the wonderful introduction. And without much ado, let me start on the topic. The draft telecommunication bill has been in news for the last couple of weeks. In fact, the corporates knew it even about maybe 1 or month before that, because they were asked to submit sort of some suggestions. But the expectation was normally when you submit any suggestion, it takes at least few months before you see the bill. But it was a great surprise to see that within 15 days of the last date of submission, the bill was already out for the sort of thoughts and views for different segments. I'm not able to move the slides. Okay. So whatever I'm going to say are purely, of course, my personal views, and I will be only covering the salient points in the bill. And let us sort of restrict the questions specific to general topics rather than asking about the organizations. That's my request. And about the draft, basically we have got three old sort of, you can say, vintage acts which actually govern the telecom regulations in India. One is Indian Telegraph Act, which is the mother act of 1885, set by the Britishers. The other two are actually almost redundant in today's world. The Wireless Telegraphy Act, which talks about the use of wireless systems, etc. We have moved much ahead of that, especially in the Wi-Fi world. And the third one is the Telegraph Wires Unlawful Possession Act, where they talk of some diameters and of copper wires. And these days we don't even use copper wires in most of the places. So those two acts are actually almost close to redundant, except for places where they use those wires. But even there, that kind of restriction which is put in those acts are actually, honestly speaking, not workable in the present day environment. And that's the reason why government possibly wanted to, revamp these three and get into a sort of, an act which is, basically law wanted to, keep pace with technology, you can say in short. If you look, so before we go into before we do a deep dive into the, sort of salient features of the Telecom Bill 2022, let us try to understand what are the kinds of telecom licenses that we currently have in India. I'm only again covering only the most popular ones. There are quite a few of them if you start doing a deep dive. So the most common one that we know is the ISP license, which is Internet Service Provider license, and they are basically three categories, A, B, and C. A is basically a national license, B is for metro, and C is for small areas. Similar to that, we also have something called as a ULVNO, Unified License Virtual Network Operator. These also are in three categories, Cat A, B, C, similar to ISP licenses. The ULVNO license is basically a subset of the unified license, which is there in point 5, which is the father of all licenses, which all those big service providers have. It's permit them to do almost everything under the sun. There is nothing beyond the unified license in the present regime in India. And the difference between the ULVNO and unified license is the unified license, it's a standalone license and you are permitted to do everything. But in the ULVNO, you are actually, you have a parent-child relationship with a UL licensee. So if, just for a hypothetical example, like if a company is a VNO licensee and they have, taken a network from, you can say, Airtel or Tata, then all their calls would actually have to route through that particular network. That's the limitation that you have in a VNO license, but otherwise they could do everything. They cannot multiple route the calls. Then the third point is the OSP. We used to have something called as OSP registrations, and registration has been done away recently, about I think 1 or 2 years back. But the fundamental concept of OSP or the other service provider still remains. It is only that they say that now registration is not required. They have clearly defined what is an OSP. It's more to do with voice or BPO communication. Previously, you had two distinct categories of domestic and international OSP. Now we have said that there is no distinct category. You can have the same category. It will all be called OSP. Only thing is there should be no toll bypass, and those that discipline has to be maintained. And you could also use common infrastructure. So we have evolved a lot in the OSP. OSP regulations actually came in 1999. And from there till 2021, there has been a lot of evolution on that particular piece. The fourth one is the audio text license, which actually is also an obsolete license as far as the present day environment is concerned. That was a license which allowed only mixing of PSTN calls, and it was also used for those pager devices. Old timers know about that. Now what the government has done is, in fact, they have. The other problem in the audio text license was that there was no revenue to the government, because it only had a fees of about 1,000 rupees to get the license, and once you get the license, you hold it for 20 years. So now what they have done is they have brought that also under the ambit of AGR, or aggregated gross revenue, where they would get a percentage share, and they have added this audio text license with slight modifications as chapter 15 in the unified license. So they, end of the day, after some years, in fact, they have said that the present audio text license holders can continue to use the audio text license, but once the license expires, then they will have to possibly secure a UL and then an audio text authorization. So these are and under the VNO and UL licenses, you can have multiple authorizations depending on your use. So access authorization is basically to give numbers to your customers. ILD, NLD, we all know. National long distance and national long distance to provide that connectivity. VSAT is also there, and then of course audio text, which I mentioned. So these are the broad types of licenses that we have under the Indian telecom regime. So let us now go into do a deep dive into the Indian Telecommunication Bill. What are the key provisions in the bill? So the most important thing here is they have come up with a definition of telecommunication services, and that would include broadcasting services, email, video, data communication services, satellite-based communication, and they have added two most important things, that is internet-based communication services and over-the-top services. Over-the-top services are technically of two types, basically: over-the-top services for communications and over-the-top services for media. So when we talk of over-the-top services for communication, it would generally, overlap with internet-based communication, where you would do, voice chat, messaging, etc. When you talk of over-the-top media services, it would be like, watching your Prime Video or watching Netflix or TV. So that would also come into that category. All of them right on the internet. And as per the present law, OTT services do not need licenses, but now the government is planning to bring them under the regulatory regime. That's what is proposed in the bill. And till this definition of telecommunication services actually comes into being, you will be surprised that I am not able to see the top portion of the screen. Yeah. the old definition, I put it on the top here, if you can see the screen. We have been using this definition of telegraph, for all kinds of communication. And if you read the definition, it says telegraph means any appliance, instrument, material, or apparatus used or capable of use for transmission or reception of signs, signals, writing, images, and sounds, or intelligence of any nature by wire, visual, or other electromagnetic emissions, radio waves, or Hertzian waves, galvanic, electric, or magnetic waves. So while we while we could possibly feel that this definition is obsolete, but the way this definition has been drafted in 1885, just imagine the foresight of the drafters. That definition still holds good, and it is still workable, and we are able to still use the same definition almost close to, you can say, 140 odd years later. So that is this telegraph definition actually is going to get changed to this telecommunication services definition, which I was just reading out. Let me go to the next slide. Yeah. Now, what are these other features in the telecommunication bill? It says that any information transmitted and received over telecommunication services could be intercepted by an authorized official of the government with the interest of sovereignty, integrity, or security of India. And exemption has been given to press messages, which are intended to be published, and these messages should actually be put out by correspondents who are accredited to central or state governments. Now, this is actually an old wine in new bottle, because we do have the provision for lawful interception, both the unified license, and from the unified license it actually flows through to the VNO. Like I mentioned to you at the beginning, that the VNO license is basically has a parent-child relationship with the parent UL license. So therefore, all the clauses that are not there in the VNO license would definitely be passed on by the unified license holder to the child. So lawful interception is part of our existing regime. It's only that they have sort of added that into the bill so that the bill is sort of made more comprehensive. The next one is the clause for cyber fraud prevention, and where they have sort of asked for stricter KYC norms and caller ID. What the government is proposing now is that whether you have a voice call or whether you have a message, everywhere the caller ID must come, and this caller ID must actually be the same name which is approved or sort of verified by the license holder while doing KYC for that particular customer. So that's something which is going to come through, and once it comes through, maybe the companies which are presently sort of providing caller ID as a service or through various apps, they might possibly run out of current business model, but they will definitely have a business model to work with the service providers to see how they can help them sort of integrate the caller ID in their system and keep up with the government regulations requirement. The next is the data protection or residency clause. This is an existing clause in the UL license and also in the VNO license. So there are two sections which I have referred here. 39, both are in chapter 6, which basically deals with security, and 39.20, 39.23. It basically says that all the call detail records, exchange detail records, or the IP detail records have to be archived for 2 years, and they should be available within India. That's first piece. The second piece more specifically says that the customer accounting information should not be transferred outside India, except for international roaming billing requirements, or for foreign subscribers, or when you're selling international private lease service. The next important sort of point in the new telecom bill is they are trying to sort of dilute the authority of TRAI. Presently, TRAI has to provide approval for certain kinds of licenses, etc. So they are trying to do away with the recommendation is to do away with this particular aspect. And also the TRAI Act prohibits person who is not served as a secretary or additional secretary to be TRAI's chairperson. There is also a proposal to remove that particular aspect, so that it is open for anyone who's qualified, who could not. Otherwise, what happens is, under the present regime, unless somebody has been a secretary or an additional secretary, he or she cannot become the chairman of TRAI. So they want to do away with that and keep that post open, so that you can have any person who's qualified head TRAI. The next thing is the Telecommunication Development Fund. So previously in the Indian Telegraph Act, we had the USOF or the Universal Service Obligation Fund, and basically 5% of the adjusted gross revenue was used, and this was used to aid rural connectivity. Of course, like I mentioned, the Telegraph Act was of 1885, and whichever place was rural in 1885, most of them have become urban now. So of course, so now what you can call it as old wine in new bottle. It's only that the fund is renamed as TDF, and the objective has been changed to boost connectivity in underserved urban areas, R&D, skill development, etc. So slightly wider, you can say, scope for spending the fund. The next one is the protection of users. So for the protection of users, this is basically, we've all heard of spam. Now they're sort of, they are trying to sort of legalize spam or, give it a statutory, backing. So they have sort of defined something called as specified messages, which means any message which is offering advertising or promoting goods, services, etc., etc. We all know what is spam. I don't have to, define that. So that has been defined as specified messages. And then in the second portion of the section, they have said that, central government may, prescribe various measures for protection of users. First is, prior consent of the users has to be taken. What we call as, informed consent or opt-in. That is required. And also the D&D aspect has also been, clearly mentioned in this particular clause. This is one of the controversial sections which many people have sort of said that why has this been included, because this says that no user shall furnish false particulars or suppress any material information while sort of submitting any application or establishing an entity for telecommunication services. There are two different schools of thoughts of this. Some people say that this is the right thing to be included in the telecommunication regulation so that the regulation is comprehensive. There is another set of or another school of thought where people are saying that a fraud is already defined in the IPC, so why should we have it separately defined, mentioned in the telecommunication regulations? But this also casts responsibility. If you see, by virtue of this being in the telecommunication regulations, it also casts responsibility on the social media apps or websites to not create fake accounts, etc. So that way, I feel that having this in this particular regulation is definitely of use, and there will definitely be corner cases where we cannot or we may not be able to look into the IPC. Looking into the telecommunication regulations would possibly help. Then comes the most important, sort of provision which is there on the spectrum management. So what the government has done here through this particular provision, or what they're recommending is, that they have said that they will have the power to assign spectrum for telecommunications through either an auction or through administrative process. Administrative process means no auction for governmental functions or in any other manner that may be prescribed. They will also have the power to, sort of reform or harmonize the, spectrum ranges. And reform is basically repurposing of the frequency range for a different use other than for which it may be currently used. And in case there have been, there are companies which have gone bankrupt or which are insolvent, they could possibly, take their frequencies also and sort of, assign it or auction it, re-auction it, or use it for any other manner as in the second bill. Mergers, demergers, and acquisitions. Earlier, whenever you had any merger, demerger, or acquisition, and if the company which was getting merged had a telecom license, one had to go back to the DOT and get the license transferred in the name of the new entity. They have sort of simplified that, and that's a good thing that has happened. They have said in the proposal itself, I'm sure it will get passed to also same way. What they are trying to say now is that if there is any merger or demerger or acquisition, please provide a notice to the central government, and the entity that emerges out of the merger or demerger or acquisition will have to comply with all the terms and conditions, etc., of the license. So the point to be noted here is that whenever you have the demerger, merger, or acquisition with any telecom entity, then this particular responsibility, let's say the second bullet, will have to be definitely clearly called out in M&A agreement, so that if there are any queries later on, or if anything goes wrong anywhere, and subsequently the DOT asks whether you have you called this out, that at that point, that particular clause would be a savior clause. insolvency proceedings and the spectrum will revert to the government is exactly what I was mentioning to you when we talked about the spectrum fees, that if any company is undergoing any insolvency proceedings, the spectrum would revert to the control of the government, and the government would be able to reutilize it. Right of way. This is a new thing which has been introduced in this bill, where they have said that when they have talked of two kinds of right of way in a government property and right of way in a private property. Right of way in the government property, they have said that it's a cakewalk. If the telecommunication infrastructure provider requires it, they will be facilitated. Against the private property, they have said that the facility provider has to submit application to the owner of the property and seek right of way. If it is provided, well and good. If it is not provided, then the facility provider can go to the government, and the government will determine what is right and what is just, and give a decision on that particular aspect. There are two other provisions that I would like to highlight. One is that the bill has also proposed a refund of fees in case a telecom or an internet provider surrenders their license. This was not there previously. Previously, if you surrendered your license, you lost all your fees. And the most important clause is the draft also mentions that the center can grant exceptions from the provisions of this act of rules to an licensee, which also was not there, because previously what used to happen was if you needed anything out of the box of the rules, they would possibly say that it's not mentioned in the rules, so it cannot be done. Now, if this thing gets passed through, at least there is a scope for people to put any out of the box request, and the government will not outrightly reject it. They would possibly consider the logic behind it and then maybe give a decision on that. So, yeah, there are some gaps which I would like to now highlight. One is, they have talked of OTT, and all that we all know is what we have been hearing about OTT, or what Wikipedia tells us about OTT, or what is defined in Google. It's not defined clearly. Why I am harping on this point is, they came up with a press note 3 in 2020, which talked of, beneficial ownership of entities which have land border with India, basically China, Pakistan, Hong Kong, etc. And here in this particular press note, they have not defined beneficial ownership, and they have kept it gray. It's still gray. It's not the Department of Telecom, it's the Foreign Investment FIPB, which owns that particular press note. And because it is not defined there in the particular press note, people have taken different kinds of definitions. Some people have taken the definition of the Company Act, which talks of significant beneficial owner as 10%. Some people have taken the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, which talks of even up to 25%. But and people have also reverted back to FIPB, and they have not. They have categorically said that or rather, they have not owned up that there is a particular definition, which means that this is something different. There is a gray area there. A lot of, if you do a Google search, you will realize that this is a question, and there are people who have also come up with definition saying that even 1% or even one share could also be beneficial ownership if you have a shareholder from any of those land bordering countries. So, considering the dichotomy that we have interpreting beneficial ownership, it would have been good if government had clearly defined what is OTT, so that the telecom regulators or the local term cell guys who would actually come for enforcement of the regulation, there is no gray area or when you're talking to those folks. The next one is on the process for reassignment of spectrum. They have again not defined that particular piece. While they have said that they can do this, they can do that, they can reform, repurpose, etc. They have not defined how are they going to allot it. Is it going to be lottery? Is it going to be first come first served? Or is it going to be the judgment of the person who is deciding? That's not been defined. So it would have been good if they sort of maintain that process. Otherwise, there would be a lot of disputes on that in times to come. Till the time it's sort of streamlined. Most of the offences which are listed in the new bill have been made cognizable, and which means that police no longer need DOT's permission. There is a possibility that this power can be misused or used to settle scores. This is another gray area which I thought I should point out. And duty of users, I think I also covered my thought on that. But there are some people who are saying it's there in IPC, it should not be there. But I covered my thought process on that when we discussed it. So I think I don't know whether I went too fast, but I have covered all the points that I wanted to say. If there are any questions, definitely I'm happy to take on to the best of my ability.
Yeah, Prakash, this is Ramesh here. I know you mentioned various licenses. So one of the challenge with the telecom, these things was the call centers.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's where the protocol TDM versus the voice over IP exchanges and the licenses to operate from a specific domain were there. So will that be covered anywhere here?
It will all be covered here. See, okay, when we talk of call centers, if it falls under the OSP license or OSP registration, which now we should not be calling it as registration, we should just be calling it as OSP, then that may not be covered here directly because that will be covered under the OSP terms and conditions. But there is a catch there. Okay, I'll explain to you the catch. The catch is like, if I was mentioning to you that the customer records, the call data records must be available for 2 years. That's what our telecom license is, unified license that we are now. But if you look at the OSP terms and conditions, it says it has to be stored only for 1 year. But the catch there is no OSP is a service provider. So obviously they have to get the trunks or lines from a service provider. And the service provider's license says 2 years. So most of the service providers, they are sort of forcing the OSPs to keep this data for 2 years. So that's a sort of crisscross fight going on between these two. So therefore, while the BPOs or the OSPs will have a separate license, they will at some point will also have to sort of abide by the master service provider's license because they are the ones who are providing them the lines.
Yeah, no, I'm asking this because most of the time the STPI kind of related organizations cannot have, or maybe they cannot crisscross the operations from one center to the other one. That's the reason.
Yeah, that is also there. Okay, so you're talking of the restrictions between an SEZ
yeah, that's right.
entity and a non-SEZ entity. So that is very clear that that's because of the SEC restrictions, that you cannot use what you have procured for an SEC, because for an SEC when you have procured, there are a tax guy will be able to tell you much better an answer on that. It's not a telecom guys restrictions. It's not a restriction from the telecom guy. It's a restriction from on the SEZ guys, that whatever you have procured for SEZ, you cannot use it for the DTA or the domestic tariff area.
Yeah, okay. Maybe that's a question of interpretation. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah.
Prakashji.
Mr. Prakash.
Yeah. Hi.
This is Jitendra Sharma. Thanks for detailed presentation. I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned that OTT will also be covered under this bill, and they will have the powers to snoop into the platform. So will that lead to some kind of, again, conflict or direct clashes where they will ask the OTT providers like WhatsApp and others to give that surveillance capabilities on their platform? Is that the intent here?
Yeah, so see, if they come under the license regime, or if finally it is passed as it is proposed, then they will have to comply with the lawful intercept regime. And if you've been doing, or maybe even if you have not done that, you could still Google and see. That's one of the prime concerns which most of the people have. You will see in the internet that they are talking of that your freedom of speech will go away and all this stuff. All those discussions are happening. But but let me tell you, there are at least 3 or 4 countries around the world where OTT is regulated. So we have to just keep our fingers crossed, and if that's the requirement of the government, then if it will come through. If it comes through, then it's better that we sort of have or inculcate a discipline of whatever we are also chatting on WhatsApp, etc.
Okay, so another thing is that will the OTT need the license, or the service providers can? No.
OTT, see how it. Okay, let us presume that the law is passed as it is proposed. Okay. So what will happen is they might say that OTT will have to, like I told you, existing, we have 2 kinds of licenses, a VNO license and a UL license. UL license is the higher license. So if you want to mix VoIP with PSTN, etc., then you need a UL license. A VNO license will only allow you to do all the mixing through your parent service provider. Now, honestly, I'm not sure what kind of license are they going to ask the OTT providers to take, but possibly they would give them this option, of whether they want to take the bigger license or whether they want to take the smaller license, or they might come up with a third license only specifically for OTT providers. In all these cases, first step is the OTT provider will have to take a license, number one. Number two, they will have to take the connections from the authorized service provider, which definitely they are doing right now. It's only that will have to be properly documented. And the third is they will have to provide this tab for lawful interception, depending on how the government wants them to do that.
So one more further question. In that case, the OTT platforms like WhatsApp will also have to comply with the data residency rules. So which means all the servers will.
They will. Their servers will have to be in India. The Indian data of Indian residents will have to be stored in India. All those. In fact, it is going to be sort of a mammoth task for them if the law comes. But only thing is, the expectation is if it is passed the way it has been proposed, then it is not that the government would say, please do it from tomorrow. I'm sure they would give them some time for implementation.
But what about the claim of the OTT platforms that there is no way to decrypt the messages?
That is okay. That's a good point you said. See, the OTT platforms, as I understand, they have it. See, voice interception is honestly not an issue for most of the platforms. Voice interceptions can be done. But there is a serious challenge on video interception. Most of them are do not have that capability, and in fact, if at all they are forced to, they would have to actually develop that particular capability, or maybe they will have to come up with some midway with the government that in any case, whatever conversation is happening, it can be recorded, and post recording the recording can be shared or something. That we will have to wait and watch as to how it develops and what kind of arguments people are putting to the bill. Because they, like as Navi sir mentioned in the beginning, the date given is 20th October, and there have been a lot of organizations which have asked for extension by at least 1 month. But the DOT has still not sort of made any comment on whether extension is coming through or not. So we will have to wait. But if extension doesn't come through, then at least by 21st or 22nd October, we would get to know what kind of objections. And in this bill, my understanding is mainly it would be the OTT providers who would be making more noise than anybody else, because for others who are already having the license or who are doing this service provider job or even a VMO job, there is not much of a change, honestly, if you ask me. It's more of an old way in new bottle.
The last question, OTT here will include the in entertainment channels like Netflix and all that?
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning. There are two kinds of OTTs, OTT communications and OTT media. When you say OTT communication, it will be all those WhatsApp, Snapchat, etc. When you talk of OTT media, it will be all that we see on television, Amazon Prime, Sony, all those guys.
Okay.
Thanks.
Prakash ji, is Adipu.
Yeah, Adipu sir.
Yeah. Now, for the OTT streaming, we use devices between the TV and the internet.
Right.
That is Google Stick and Fire Stick from the Amazon.
Right.
Whether this device will be monitored by this law?
They will be able to monitor that. They will come up with certain you can say processes or policies. Initially, I don't think they will monitor those sticks. They will possibly monitor only the service providers. But as the law evolves or as the process matures, definitely that's going to happen. But it may not happen immediately with this bill, but my expectation is it will happen sometime later.
Okay. At this point of time, my understanding is that Amazon and Google are able to track the behavior of the viewers, what they're watching, when they're watching, where they're watching, all that. So that can be prevented through this bill, or it still continues?
No, that will. In fact, that's exactly what's going to happen now. Because once they say OTT will be regulated and they want the OTT folks to provide all details of what's happening, it would also include customer behavior, etc. But see, the only thing in the OTT media is you can't make any call, you can't do anything. You are only a receiver there. So as far as you are concerned, it's only what you are watching. So let us take OTT communications and OTT media. Two different things. In OTT communication, you could be a terrorist, you could initiate a call, you could do something which is against the government. And so the service provider is also supposed to monitor under their license, because they are supposed to ensure that no fraud takes place, no security breach takes place, all those things. And as far as the user, you are also not supposed to do all these things. So both the parties can be held liable. But when you look at an OTT media, in OTT media, you are only watching what is being provided to you. You have no control on what is going to be telecasted. So generally, the customer will not be at the receiving end there. It's only the service provider who will be at the receiving end.
That's okay. But I'm talking about the media part. See, for example, in the media, when we use the TV with a instrument to connect to the OTT providers like Z or the Netflix or the Yahoo, whatever it is. But see, the instrument prepared by a by Google or the Amazon, it is manufactured by some American China company. Now we are bringing and connecting to TV and internet using it. But unnecessarily, the Google or the Amazon, they don't have any play. See, I am a consumer. My provider is Z Entertainment. We do have something relationship, but the unit manufacturers do not have any relationship with this service. But now they are monitoring the behavior. That's what happening at the present. So whether this law, after it's passed in India, is it going to control that part of no play from the?
No, I have not seen any provision with it. I got your point. What you're trying to say is the hardware is from a particular company, and what you are viewing is from another company. That company is getting regulated under the telecom regulation. But what happens to the hardware? So,
Right.
for the hardware, the answer that I'll give you is, if you look at the telecom regulations that we have right now, the unified license and the BNO, which I told you, they have come up with a clear-cut clause there, which says that the service providers have to induct only trusted telecom equipment in their network, which means basically, in short terms, it would mean that non-China is what we can clearly say, that's or any equipment which is not a background. That's what we could possibly say, although it's not mentioned in clear-cut terms. But they would possibly, I feel that they will also come up with similar restrictions for the kind of devices that we are using in our televisions, where they would say that those kind of devices which are being sold will also have to be, sort of trusted source cleared or something like that. But that may not happen immediately, because, if they try to, boil the ocean, then nothing will work. So they will have to do it step by step. Yeah. So that will happen, but I don't think it will happen immediately. It will happen after. Initially, they will try to, sort of discipline the service providers. Then they will come to the user level and sort of, do that. But that will be a little later. Your point is valid, sir.
Yeah. Second question is about in banking industry, I saw there is service providers who will providing the services of SMS to bank customers. Bank will send a message, and these service providers, they interpret and formatted the message and push the SMS to phones of users like us. Whether these intermediaries, that is in between the service providers, the company which is creating the SMS message and pushing to the end users like you and me, are also going to become.
They will also get covered under the definition of the telecommunication services. So that's a broad definition.
Okay, thank you.
Even the email services will come under
Yeah, they have added, see, broadcasting, email, video, data communication services.
So Gmail will be subject to licensing. And one of the tough calls is this identification of the user of a service when it comes to Gmail or WhatsApp. Now, WhatsApp, of course, can go back to the telephone number if they are, because WhatsApp account can be opened even today only with a telephone, even though you can access it from computer later on. So there is a direct identity associated with mobile account, which is KYC based. Whereas email is at present no identification is taken. So it is a free for all kind of a service. Now, how they will be able to accept the need for identifying, I think they have used some words like clear identification or something similar to that, unequivocal identification or something like that, just short of KYC. So now all of us, we take our account on some pseudonym. Okay, I may have Navi 1, Navi 2, Navi 3, or whatever is that. Now, Gmail is not asking who is Navi 1, who is Navi 2 kind of a thing. Now, if they start asking those questions, then how will this current system of email where pseudonymization is basically the way it is being handled now, how it will be able to use this licensed regime? Whether that responsibility, and you have to also look at this along with the other overlapping laws which may come in Information Technology Act, certain guidelines which says IP address and other things will have to be recorded. So I think it is, we have to see how it is going to roll out. And most importantly, the WhatsApp will be, I think if the government pushes this through and gets it passed in the December session, WhatsApp will be coming under this regime before the January Supreme Court hearing. Okay. So I think that is the underlying factor of this urgency, I suppose. Okay.
Sir, I have the same concern that if this bill passes through, it will overlap the IT ministry, it will overlap the Information Broadcasting Ministry.
Yeah.
It will give superior power to DOT, and my personal experience of working with IT ministry and DOT, IT ministry has still kept with the time. DOT is still living in Stone Age, and if they are in control, then what will be the role of other two? And how will the conflict resolution will go away? Because with data residency, you are also talking about the cloud. Because all the data is coming into the cloud. Email is also into the cloud now, right? That will also come into the picture. If they are gonna manage and the OTT content, which is the entertainment content, the Information Broadcasting Ministry, what are they gonna do? It's all that.
Currently, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting and Ministry of IT have been working together. We know that last February 2021 joint press conference was held between the two ministers. So they are trying to work out some way of collaboration. Now the telecom DOT, of course, DOT is actually today part of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology only, no? So
no, sir, this is a separate ministry, and there is another catch in this. They are the only one who has the separate cadre of service. They have a cadre which is called the Indian Telecom Services.
ITS.
ITS services. And if you deal with that species, it's a very different.
I remember when the Communication Convergence Act was proposed somewhere in 2001, 2002, it led to the demise of Mr. What is that? Bihar minister, no?
Ramvilas Paswan.
Ramvilas Paswan. Because they wanted to merge the ministry, and he opposed to that.
It's been a long-standing claim of ITS lobby that we are the subject matter expert, and Ministry of IT should not exist.
Jitendra, your point. You see, Jitendra, if you remember in the presentation I was mentioning about the downsizing of TRI, and they're saying that they don't want that restriction of secretaries.
Yes.
It was precisely to the point that you mentioned just now.
We have worked very closely with them in this OSP regulation. I represent
the
organization for
role of TRA, I think, will become very low, because I think even the dispute resolution will go to the dispute resolution authority, whichever is that TDC.
No, Navi sir, actually, see, when DOT, the people who are there, they have time only for doing the routine job that they are there. They don't, honestly, they don't have time for doing R&D. That is the reason TRA was established, where TRA will do all the R&D, submit all this to DOT, and then obviously there will be a discussion and they'll validate. But now it looks like, finally they want to downsize that. That's what it looks like.
But this act actually, if you look at it, the basic objective is to protect the telecom service operators. If you look at the penalties and other things, we don't have any rights, much of the rights to the individuals, except against spam. Okay, under one section under spam, some compensation may be claimed by the consumer. But right of way and other things are all against the individual. Suppose, and there are also punishments, like suppose you cut a cable wire. Now, I think that will be a serious offense here under civil this thing. So I think cable operators where this sort of things happen, no cable wire being deliberately cut, or cable signals being stolen, kind of a thing, that will be creating liabilities to the individuals. So this has got more against the individuals in terms of penalties. That is how I look at it.
Yeah, no, it is, see, there is one thing clear. So the DOT is very clear on one point that they don't want to harm the infra providers because they are the ones who are investing in the country.
Yeah.
And if they don't invest, then we will not progress. So
Mm.
definitely that particular element would be there, whatever law they come up for. Because tomorrow if they make things difficult for any of those major service providers and if they say that we are not going to do anything further, then your development will stop.
So tower companies,
Yeah.
though they will have some advantage because the right of way benefit. Individuals cannot say put up legal cases preventing them to put up the tower and that kind of thing, I think. But anyway, it's interesting development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but the only one thing that we need to wait and watch is, we have to just keep looking in the news to see what is the submission that especially the OTT guys have made. Because that is what will decide
They will
on.
directly go to the court, and because the current case is pending with Supreme Court, they will say that this cannot be passed before the Supreme Court decides in January 2023. Okay.
But what happens after January?
After,
Sir, my experience, I'll just give a brief point.
Yeah,
here. I have seen many, I work with DOT very closely. I've seen many consultation paper which has come in. There is a consultation paper which was floated in 2018 or 19 on the cloud side of it. That's still pending. So, I mean, maybe this will also take some sweet amount of time. I don't see it going through very quickly because even the Ministry of IT will be registering it at some level. My understanding. And as Navi sir said that it has far-reaching impacts, and someone needs to take a very cognizant view of the entire spectrum of the issues, because you giving control of everything to DOT, it's taking a couple of steps back from the current scenario. And my experience with DOT has been that anything and everything takes multiple years. They don't take very quick decisions. And you have the subject matter expertise in IT today. They have multiple organizations who've done wonderful jobs under it. CERT is doing fairly good amount of, they are doing fairly good amount of valuable job here. So all this coming into the picture, I believe this will take some amount of time.
Yeah, but the minister has said 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, Prakash, are they going to use TRA itself, or they are going to have one more regulatory authority?
No. They are only TRI will be there. Only thing is they are trying to say they will downsize it or rather clip their powers.
Okay.
Very interesting, background to TRAI. If I'm allowed, I will just give you 1 minute brief. When DOT was actually the only authority in the telecom space in the late 80s and early 90s. And they used to directly own BSNL. Okay. So when the new private telecom operators came in, this was one of the concepts which was raised, that when the regulator also owns a telecom company, how will he become impartial? And that's where I think in 1996 or 97 the TRI Act came in, that they said, okay, we are making the regulator separate and department separate. Over the period of time, they have both disjointed themselves, and that's where they feel now that concern will not come from the private regulators, and TRI might have served its own purpose, and we can actually do away with this. But I believe not many people in TRI will be happy with this, because this is ministry's view, and ministry means IT view. DOT and IT ministry, DOT and telecom ministry is one and the same. So this is ministry's view, but what happens to the IT and other ministries? And this is far-reaching. And it's just not, there are multiple cases which is pending. Twitter case is pending, which is with the IT ministry today. I think Facebook also has some amount of issues with the which is litigation which is going on. Data residency issues are also going on, and you also have the PDP Act, so which is pending. So multiple other issues. I think this will still take some time to sort it out. And as an industry body, I think some of those there are a couple of industry bodies which are submitting the questions on these lines only.
But as Prakash pointed out, the moment they got the industry response, very quickly the draft was put up in the public domain, which indicates that there is some feeling that they would like to push through this before, let's say, PDPA comes. Now, obviously, they know that there will be conflict in terms of regulatory things with PDPA and now with the Supreme Court judgment. That may be one of the reasons why it may be pushed faster than what we expect also. Anyway, it is just a counter view, but that instead of delaying it, it may be accelerated because some of the officials want this act to be in place before PDPA comes. Okay. Any other point or questions?
Thanks, everyone.
Navi sir, one question, one last question. Last question.
Last point which I wanted to
So
make.
about data residency issues, like we saw RBI propagating some rules about data residency for banks and financial companies. Now the personal data protection bill or the new bill might also decide on that matter. Will the telecom bill also, will there not be 3 different legislations deciding on the subject of data residency, and what kind of scenario with regard
to sectoral laws? And
Yeah.
just as the Data Protection Authority will recognize RBI as the sectoral regulator for banks, they will recognize TRA as a sectoral regulator, and they will not interfere with what they have brought in. That's my view, because TRA is already established also, so you cannot push them out. In fact, we know that TRA came up with a privacy law also some time back, okay, which was something which the ministry was not happy. They came up with their own privacy law. IRDA came up with their own privacy. So this kind of sectoral regulators coming up and establishing their control over their sector, I think it will remain, and I think it will be accommodated by the Data Protection Authority.
Okay.
One last point, I think the current cabinet minister for IT and telecom is same. So if this has come in, maybe there is some understanding there, at least at the ministry level.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So Manju.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for a quick yet thorough review of the telecommunication bill, and especially all the interpretations in simple, plain language and not just legal terms. And thank you everyone for joining the discussion and making it more informative. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prakash.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Prakash.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Jitendra was active today because
Yeah.
it was topic.
Yeah, no, good. Actually,
Yeah,
nice
Anil
to have.
got something to say.
No, it was just congratulating Prakash for deciphering all these licensing terms. Because when I read the law, always there's a challenge of understanding or interpreting the licensing part. So Prakash has wonderfully explained those licensing part.
Yeah, good.
Thanks, Anil. Thank you.
Prakash.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Good night.